Another point that needs to be mentioned with regards to Zakat al-Fitr, that as mentioned after Salatul Isha, Zakat al-Fitr is an obligation upon every person that has the qut or the necessities of the day in the day of Eid, like the day of Eid. If you have the food and the necessities of you for that day, anything extra, then you have to give Zakat al-Fitr. So this is unlike Zakat al-Mal. Zakat al-Mal has its own conditions. It's upon the wealth, right? It's Zakat al-Mal. As you see, even the terminology, Zakat al-Mal means the Zakat of the money or the wealth of the different types of money. But Zakat al-Fitr, it's called Zakat al-Abdan. It's the Zakat on the individual. So it's by the count of the people, basically. So if you have, which is a poor person, becomes obligatory upon him to give Zakat al-Fitr if you have extra food or necessities more than what is sufficient for himself. And that's why most people, at least the ones that we're addressing, they have more than what they need for the day of the Eid. So that means it becomes obligatory upon everyone. And this is by the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, the clear hadith, فَرَضَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم زَكَاةَ الْفِطْرِ. Farad. He made it an obligation. عليه الصلاة والسلام زكاة الفطر صاع من تمر أو صاع من شعير. صاع, it's a volume from tamr or sha'ir or barley or any of the things that can be saved, grains and the like of this, of the food that is necessary for the people in whatever community that they're in. But the point here is the hadith says على كل ذكر وأنثى, on every male and female, عبد and حر, slave or free, صغير أو كبير, young or old, everyone. So, and that means how to calculate Zakat al-Fitr. First of all, it's to be given food to the poor. The poor person has to receive it as food. And this is Jamahir Ahl Ilm upon this. So you can make tawqeel, and this is how the masajid and the brothers, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them, they will do that job for you. So if you give money, you're given, as they said, $10, they will take the $10 and they will purchase food and they will go to the poor and make sure that the poor, they receive food. And put aside all of these reasoning. Food, the poor need money better than food. Put all these reasonings on the side. The Prophet ﷺ, he made it like this. And the statement of the hadith like this. And the other hadith, Zakat al-Fitr, for two reasons. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, طهرة للصائم من الرفث واللغو. It's purification for the fasting person from the things that was done during the month of Ramadan when a person is fasting, a word here or there, something. So it's purification of one's fast. And that purification from the same sort of thing that we abstained from. When you're fasting in Ramadan, you are not abstaining from money, you're abstaining from food and drink. So you give from the same sort of thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you to stay away from. And the second thing, as the hadith says, وَطُعْمَ طُعْمَ لِلْمَسَاكِينَ. And tu'ma from at-ta'am, food for the poor on the day of Eid, so that you make them enriched by the bounty of Allah. So this is how the zakah should be. And then when it comes to the numbers, you know, as since it's upon every person, so if someone is responsible for his own self, then he gives zakah on his own self. He has a wife and children. Then anyone that is dependent on you, that you spend on them, whether the spending is an obligation upon you, like your wife and your children, you're obligated to spend on them. So whatever, count how many. You need to go home and count your family. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes it, and anyway. So you count all of the ones in the household. It might be others that are in the household. A person might have a servant. I'm not sure if anybody has servants nowadays, here, at least in this part of the world. So if you have a servant, if you have someone that is dependent on you, living together in the same household, relatives that you spend on them, whatever, then you pay for each person the sa'. And the sa' is a volume, so to be on the safe side, it's definitely less than 3 kilograms of whatever grains. So this is how it's calculated with whatever people would get, whether it's rice, and even the cans of food is permissible, as the ulama, they say, but as long as the weight of the inside is what matters for things that can be saved, or whatever means of food that are being saved. So this is the dependencies. If a woman is pregnant, it is not a must, but it's recommended to give for the what's in the womb of the mother. It's not a mandatory thing, but it's recommended to be away from the differences of opinion. If someone, a child that is working or things like that, he's dependent, he has his own way of spending, then of course he gives on himself. If you're spending on someone, even if the spending is not an obligatory thing upon you, you have a relative poor that you're spending on them. So this is also something that can come out on their behalf. And if a person is independent, can you give zakat al-fitr on someone that has his own separate household and wealth and everything like this? You can, with a condition that he would give you the permission, because it's a ibadah. You cannot make the ibadah on someone else's behalf. So he has to have that intention, and he can pay you later, for example. Right? If you don't find poor people, for example, and you have relatives in back home, if you have a place and you tell them, give on my behalf the zakat al-fitr, and when I see you or I send you money, all of these types of things, it's fine. The organizations and the like of this, we have to be extremely careful. When you give money to an organization, first of all, it has to be legitimate and everything is fine and everything is safe. And at the same time, what reaches the poor is what's an obligation upon you. So if the organization would take a portion of this for the logistics and the managerial matters and things like this and services, this is something that you have to add so that purely what you give reaches the poor. This is in Zakatul Mal, is very important, and also for Zakatul Fitr. If you give Zakatul Mal to someone, you are responsible for the transportation. If your Zakatul Mal requires transportation, who's going to pay for the transportation? It's supposed to be yourself. So if they pay in a different category of spending, that's fine if they do it out of their own goodness. But if they take from the zakah money for the service of transporting, for example, the food, then it's not permissible unless they tell you, so you give extra, because the food has to be, or the zakah purely has to reach the poor. So this is some of the ruling. Last thing is, it's obligatory after Maghrib of the night of Eid. The meaning of obligatory, meaning that before that it's not mandatory yet that you have to give it. Once the sunset of the last day of Ramadan, then it's an obligation. The obligation starts. And it's best, talking about in theory, right? The best time for it, when it reaches the poor, is after Fajr and before Salatul Eid. After Fajr of the day of Eid and before Salatul Eid, because it's meant to be for the day of Eid, for the poor to be happy that they receive lots of food. After Fajr and before Salatul Eid. Of course, this is very tight, and how can people do this, especially when it's not that accessible? So it can be a day or two before even the Eid. And this is by the statement of Ibn Umar, and the Sahaba were upon this. They would give the zakat day or two. So it's okay to reach the poor day or two before Eid, but not more than that. Not more than that. So therefore, when the announcement was, you have to give before what, the 26th? The 27th, but are you sure? Are we sure? Here, 27th? Huh? The 27th night. So the cutoff time is Friday night. After Friday night, it's still valid for you, but not that the masjid will take responsibility for that. So if you want to give it here in the masjid, before the end of the prayer of the 27th and Friday, inshallah ta'ala, and then they will take care of it, inshallah ta'ala, to make sure that it reaches the poor. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept and to make us among those who are accepted in these blessed nights, and to bring this harmony and the goodness and the brotherhood and the love for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And matters of differences, if it's within the boundaries of the Sharia, the boundaries of the deen, should not create any enmity or hatred among people. We should be at ease with one another, inshallah ta'ala. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.